Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of Biz Books. Thank you so much for joining us, either on by podcast or on YouTube. I appreciate you being here. My name is Gene Marks, your very regular host for this show. But enough about me. I'm talking to Mike Paton, who goes by Paton, so I don't want to confuse anybody. Mike, I'm going to be calling you Paton because that's how you are referred
Please.
to. Uh, Paton is the co-author of a book called Process: How Discipline and Consistency Will Set You and Your Business Free. Paton is the co-author with Lisa Gonzalez. First of all, Paton, thank you very much for joining me. I'm thrilled to have you here. It's a great book.
Very much my pleasure. Thanks, Gene, for having me.
So, tell me a little bit about your company, EOS, about you, and about Lisa. You can go in any order that you want, but ultimately, let's get to like why you wrote the book.
Yeah, you bet. Well, let's start with EOS. EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a simple and complete set of tools and practical concepts that help business owners and leaders run better businesses and live better lives. And when you're implementing EOS in an entrepreneurial company, you're working to strengthen the 6 key components of your business: vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction. And Lisa Gonzalez, my fabulous co-author, and I were highly motivated to write the process book because a lot of entrepreneurs put that last in their list of priorities when they look at the 6 key components. And we noticed that neither of us were as passionate about process as we could be, and maybe therefore not quite as good at teaching it. And so, this was a passion project for both of us to help ourselves get better at teaching it and help our clients get better at strengthening that essential process component.
That's great. You have been a long time author, right? I mean, you've got, and I see behind you there are other books that you've written. Tell me a little bit about how you make your money and what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as you know, with all those books behind you and all the authors you've interviewed, very few people get into the writing books business for profit.
True.
It is really because you've got something to share with the world. And so when I became an EOS implementer almost 16 years ago, very quickly, I wanted to add something to the library of books describing EOS. And so I went to, Gino had written the book Traction in 2007, the year I went off to get trained and learn how to do this. And a year or so later, I approached him and said, "Hey, I've got an idea for a business fable that would tell the story of a company implementing EOS." And he had the same idea on his long-term vision list on a document we teach in our process. And so we agreed to collaborate. And that book was published in 2012. And so that was the first of the 2 books I've written. There may be more, but generally the idea that there's a need in the world for a message that isn't out there in exactly the form I would like
Sure.
motivates me.
Okay, Peyton. So you consult and you coach and you help people with process and help people grow their businesses. Um, Tell me about like the sort of the demographic of your clients. Like who are the kind of clients that you're out for? Is there anybody too big or too small?
Yeah, so EOS was built for privately held entrepreneurial companies that have between 10 and 250 employees.
Okay.
There are definitely companies smaller and larger running on EOS. There are publicly traded companies running on EOS. I've got 2 in my roster of clients, but that's for whom the system was built. There's a unique set of challenges causing entrepreneurial leaders in that stage of growth to hit the ceiling, and the tools really resonate with the people at that stage of development. And what we say is we call ourselves EOS implementers. There are 650 professional EOS implementers around the globe,
Hmm.
and we are teachers, facilitators, and coaches when we're working with the leadership team of an entrepreneurial company.
When you say there's 650 EOS implementers around the world, are you the parent organization, or are you just one of those implementers?
Well, for a while, I was both. I was the visionary for EOS worldwide for
Mhm.
5 years. I succeeded Gino Wickman, the creator of EOS, in that role. And just before COVID hit, purely coincidentally, I assure you, I stepped down to go back to my practice helping companies running on EOS full time. So since early 2020, I've been a full-time EOS implementer, an author, and a speaker. And EOS Worldwide is run by a couple of friends and colleagues of mine, and that's the parent company.
You know, I don't even know what your degree was in college, but I'm hoping it was psychology or psychiatry, because it kind of sounds like that's what your life
It
is
was
probably all
English,
about.
but when I described what I was doing with EOS to my brother, who's several years younger than me and likes to remind me of that many times, he said, "So kind of like therapy for
Yeah.
business owners and leaders," and there is some truth to that, because you know the problem resolution mechanism is you've got to name it and own it and get in the room with the people you got to rely on to fix it. And if that isn't therapy, I don't know what is. So
It's hilarious. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Gordon Ramsay's old show, his Kitchen Nightmare show. I don't know if you've ever seen that show. And but
and I do a similar amount of swearing when I'm working with an
I believe
entrepreneurial
it. As long
company.
as, but you don't take your shirt off, do you, and get changed like he does?
Yes, I would lose all the business I've got now, Gene. So no, I do not.
We're all very grateful to hear that. Yeah,
Mhm.
and his show was making me, it always made me, firstly, the first few seasons that took place in the UK, because he would go in and scream and yell and do, which I'm assuming is not your methodology. And then, and 95% of this business is still failed. I mean, there's still, you have to have I guess, a mindset to do what you got to do, to expect that you can lead the horse to water, you can teach them everything, you can write books like this, like Process, but there's a certain percentage of people that are just, the majority.
Yeah, I give Gino a lot of credit. One of the things I give him a lot of credit for is, EOS was built for well-run companies that know there's a next level and can't figure out a way to get there themselves, or are struggling more to get there. We don't really work with the kind of clients Gordon, took on that were on the verge of collapse. Sometimes it's just too late, no matter how talented or good those people are. But the cool thing is, if we're in the room with somebody who's considering running on EOS, and we describe what the journey to implement EOS looks and feels like, and they're not likely to benefit from the work we're about to consider doing together, they know it and we know it, and we're able to part ways as friends and colleagues, rather than trying to jam a square peg in a round hole. That's a big part of the reason this stuff works. Is if it isn't going to work for you, you're probably not going to sign on.
And we're going to get to the book in a second, but this all dovetails into the content of your book. But I'm kind of curious, how long do your engagements with your clients last? I mean, if I were to hire you.
On average, and we keep data on this, on average, a client spends 10 full days with an EOS implementer over the course of about 2 years, learning the system, learning the tools. We're facilitating their meetings. And then somebody on the leadership team takes over the role of EOS implementer from inside the organization. They keep running on EOS, but they're not dependent on us. That we're sort of anti-consultant in that way, is we don't want to dig ourselves more deeply into the organization. We want to come teach a system, fully implement that system throughout the organization, and then get out of their way and let them run their business using the tools we've shared with them.
That's great. All right. Well, that's super interesting, Peyton. And there's no shortage of prospective clients for you. It's just a matter of finding them and making them understand the value from hiring somebody like yourself. Let's jump in this book, because this book is about process. You write early on in the book, like in the first chapter, you say that process doesn't destroy freedom, it creates freedom. Can you explain to me what you mean by that?
Yeah, what I mean by that, well, it's funny. When we had sent the finished manuscript to the publisher for the last time, and they were typesetting and all that, I did my first big workshop for an entrepreneurial audience exclusively on the subject of process. And afterwards, Gino called me and asked how things went. And I said, really, really well. I was very pleasantly surprised by the reaction from the audience, and felt accessible and connected. And he goes, so let me get this straight, Paton. You spoke for 75 minutes on the subject of process alone to a room full of early stage entrepreneurs, and they liked it.
Right.
So that's where that comes from, Gene, is that the perception in the minds of most entrepreneurs is you're either an entrepreneur or you're process oriented. And as we illustrate very clearly in the book, that's just
It's not
not
true.
the case.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs succeed because they're sort of naturally and genetically encoded as process driven. It just comes so automatically to them. They associate other people being process driven with 500-page SOP manuals and rigid compliance cultures where nobody's allowed to think for themselves. And that's just not true. There's an entrepreneurial approach to strengthening your process component that we teach in the book. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's funny too, because if you ask anybody that's running a business, starting up a business, I have 10 employees, and my business has been around for about 20 years now. We all get the importance of process, but I don't really know if a lot of us have our arms around if we're just saying that, like, we truly don't understand the benefits of having a good, multiple good processes in a business. And I mean, tell me a little bit about, because you sell this. This is like you live this. What are the benefits of living, running a business that's based on really good regular processes internally?
Well, let's start with this freedom thing.
Okay.
Let's stay on that thread.
Okay.
So the first and most important thing is you grow, and 10 is where it starts for a lot of people to fall apart at the seams. As you grow to 10 or 20 or 30 people, one of the people we interviewed for the book, a company running on EOS, my good friend Ali Nasser, he and his integrator were talking to Lisa and I, and he said, when we started this business, if you wanted me to draw the process for almost everything on the whiteboard, it would be somebody who's a new employee gets an opportunity and they come see me.
Right.
And then I tell them what to do and they go do that thing and they come back and see me. And then they go and do that other thing and they come back and see me. And he said, when you document and simplify your core processes, you eliminate the come see Ali from the process. And so that's, benefit number one is you're teaching people how to do the work you would do if you could clone yourself the way you would do it. And so it frees you up to not get sucked into day-to-day stuff every day.
What that reminds me of is I know you must have read back in the day the Michael Gerber's book, the E-Myth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, one of the takeaways I had from that book was he talked about the process of like franchises, like a McDonald's, where everything is process oriented, instructions written down, from how to make fries to how to order the beef. And that way, whoever owned a number of McDonald's, you put a manager in place, and even if people leave, they just, it just works. It keeps
turnkey.
Yeah.
Turnkey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and I'm a big fan of Gerber. He was a major, his work was a major inspiration for the book. And, that ability to delegate rather than abdicate, right? So how do you teach people your system for excellence without needing to be in the trenches alongside them every day, teaching them every step in the system? And that's what we're trying to teach in process.
how do we'll jump around a little bit, but just because you bring it up about putting in that processing and getting away from people always having to come back to you and come back to you and come back to you. There's a percentage of people that run businesses that are just naturally, their DNA is they're micromanagers, and they have to be minutely, involved in everything. And I'm kind of curious, they're the ones that would probably, I would imagine, buy in, understand the whole concept of having a specific process for doing something, but would seem to be the hardest people to convince to then implement that process and live it, and back away.
Well, there's a little therapy here, Gene, because it's perfectionism, right? It's nobody's ever going to be able to do it the way I would do it if I did it myself. So why don't I just save everybody a lot of time and trouble and nudge you out of the way and take care of this? And I'm guilty of that. That's kind of my natural go-to. And it still trips me up today. I'm in the waning years of my career, and I still catch myself doing the same thing. So, it just means you're a normal human being. But if you want to grow and scale your business beyond your own capacity to manage everything, you have to learn how to do it. And the way to do that is to learn and grow and push yourself outside of your comfort zone. And quite frankly, that's the first goal of the book process is helping convert the mindset of the perfectionists, the entrepreneurs who believe you have to choose between freedom and process and don't understand the connection between those things. We're just trying to reset mindsets in the early stages of that book.
And does that also mean just having to accept that things might not be perfect, mistakes will be made?
Mistakes will be made.
Yeah,
Yep.
and
And they're the best lessons you can use to teach your people. You win some and you learn some. So
yeah,
and again, tough lesson to learn. And a lot of businesses, the general perception is, and often it's quasi true, if not completely true, we can't afford more than one mistake every 9 months. And we had ours back in October, so we until July, I need to do everything again,
it's
right? That's
ridiculous.
a normal predicament for a business owner.
Yeah. And once you do accept that and you can understand the value that, the benefits will outweigh the cost. Mistakes will be made, but if you allow people to follow a process and do stuff on their own without you micromanaging them, you'll be able to do a lot more for the business and therefore grow the business in different ways. Right. So,
Yeah, and again, it's what you want, right?
mhm.
If in the end of the day you're never going to let go and you're always going to micromanage, then you need to let go of your desire to grow and scale a company beyond the number of people you can successfully micromanage, right?
Right.
Where you get yourself into trouble is you're trying to grow a business that requires delegation and elevation, and you won't learn to delegate and elevate. That's where you get into trouble. There are lots of great $1.5 million businesses, or 8 people businesses, and they should stay 8 people and they should be profitably run and serve their customers well. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's just, if you want to have 100 employees, you can't keep being the one person everybody goes to for direction.
It's funny. You've just exactly described my business. I mean that 1.5 million to $2 million range. I've got 10 people, and I'm happy.
Yeah,
We're good. I don't really want to be a 50-person company,
yeah.
and we have a good core group of people that's been with me for a while, and we have nice clients, and it's a good life. So, but you're right. You got to make those choices. Now, as much as we're talking about delegating responsibility and having people do their stuff, you still write. You have a whole chapter about owning the process. You say you can't just hand it off to them and bolt to the door. Tell me why not?
Well, we write this up in the book, and hopefully with what people can recognize as a bit of a sense of humor. But back in the day, I was a pretty decent salesperson and sales manager, and I had more than one business owner come to me and say, "Hey, Paton, you seem to know what you're doing here in the sales thing. Why don't you just write down everything about the way you do your job, and then we'll teach everybody else to do it that way, and man, we'll sell a lot more stuff." Well, no decent salesperson with the shred of an ego wants to do that.
Of
So
course.
that's one of the many reasons why you don't want to ask your people to document your processes for you. The other reason is that most of us believe our jobs are by nature more complicated than they really are. And so, I'm the guy who would have said to my boss, "Well, oh, hey, Steve, no, you don't understand. I mean, this is way more complex than you. There's no set of steps that I replicate every time. I mean, sometimes my clients are old, and sometimes they're young, and sometimes they're skinny, and sometimes they're a little chunky, and sometimes they're tall, and and so you got to do it. And Steve would kind of look at me and go, "Yeah, Peyton, you're full of crap," and he was right. And so there's all kinds of inertia against people documenting and simplifying their own processes that we teach in the book. The leadership team needs to own it and drive it with a focus on getting everybody 100% on the same page with the right and best way to do the handful of things our way. So when we're out in the world, we're making the difference we want to make. That's all.
So, so just a couple questions on that. One is, if you do want to document the process, use the salesman as an example. Who should then be doing? I mean, what you're saying to me is like the worst person to do that is the actual salesperson that's performing the work. It should be somebody else. Does that mean it should be you, the owner?
The
or
sales
somebody?
leader or the owner should walk alongside the salesperson, learn, observe, take their own notes, ask questions. Hey, what, if you had to boil down the building of a sales relationship into 3 important steps, what would you say those are, Sally?
Right, right.
Is the kind of thing like just partner with your people to try and figure this out alongside them rather than asking them to do the work for you. But at the end of the day, make sure that whatever you've observed and optimized and written down, the salesperson gets a chance to poke holes in it. Hey, Sally, based on the work we did together, here's what we created. This is the way I think we ought to teach new salespeople if and when we are bringing them on board, how to do what you do so well naturally. What do you think about this? Is this right? Is this wrong? And in that relationship, you're actually going to get a really solid finished product, and the salesperson is going to feel involved but not taken advantage of, if
Got
that
it.
makes sense.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Take us through, Paton, the 3-step process documenter that you write about.
Yeah. So when a client's working with us and they need a little help from their EOS implementer to strengthen the process component, we take them through a 3-step process. Step 1 is let's decide what in our business needs to be systemized and what doesn't. We believe there's only a handful of core processes in most businesses. Izzy Sharp, who founded Four Seasons, was once famously quoted as saying, "We want to systemize the predictable so we can humanize the exceptional." And what he meant by that was, if all our people are heads down, focused on following a rigorous process all the time, then when a guest needs something, they're not going to notice that. They're not going to delight them, blah, blah, blah. So, when we make a bed in a sleeping room, there's probably a 10-step checklist we need to put together that will allow our service people to do that more quickly and more consistently well, right? And so that's step 1 in the 3-step process documenter is, what are those things we should systemize?
You're identifying those things,
yeah,
right?
we call those our handful of core processes. We're identifying the handful of core processes.
Okay.
Step 2 is document and simplify each of those core processes. What that means is jot down the handful of most important steps in each process, not every step and every ad hoc, one-off, nuanced, different way. But if we had to boil it down to 5 to 15 really important steps, what are those? And then just give us the who, what, when, where, and how of the right and best way to do each of those steps. And then the third thing is package them in a way that makes them easy to find and use. I can't tell you how many times a process initiative has failed in an organization because the finished product looks beautiful sitting on a credenza somewhere, but the people doing the work documented in that process manual or checklist can't use it comfortably in the field. And so just make sure if they're outside doing electrical work, you've got a laminated piece of plastic they can write on with a dry erase marker instead of a sheet of paper that's going to get all crumpled up in 5 seconds.
When you talk about packaging it, I mean, there's the physical packaging, like you just said, like some type of a document or some type of a, on a clipboard. It could be something you give to people on an app or on a, on an internal, website that you can look at. But is communications part of that packaging? Is it, do you include training? Is that
training is actually part of the next step in the process. And that is, how do you get these documented, simplified, and packaged processes followed by all? We call it the followed by all checklist, because knowing how to do it well every day and actually doing it well every day requires the changing of habits and consistent behaviors. And left to their own devices, people will revert back. And so training is actually the first step in that. Now, sometimes a client chooses to package their core processes in a way that's embedded into a training mechanism, and that's becoming more and more popular today, Gene. There are a number of organizations who have built software to warehouse process videos that are all connected to a learning management system. So
Mhm.
once you make that decision to package your core processes in that way, you're actually already thinking about the training mechanism you're going to use to change behaviors.
Makes sense. You've been talking about core processes, but you also write about something called a proven process. And I was wondering if you can give us the distinction between the two.
Yeah, the proven process in a company running on EOS is one of the four elements of something we teach in the vision component called marketing strategy. And this is where we get the leadership team 100% on the same page with the target market of their organization, a definition of the ideal customer,
Okay.
and then a message that you're going to use to compel more of those ideal customers to do business with you. That message includes three uniques, just three differentiators. Why are we different and better than the competition? Said in clear, simple language, a proven process, and a guarantee. The proven process, best illustration of that is this EOS process behind me. It's a one-page visual illustration of the journey an EOS implementer takes his or her client on when they're interested in learning more about EOS, and all the way to the time where they're a long-time satisfied business partner and they're running EOS on their own. And we use that as part of our marketing and sales message to deliver a message to the marketplace that we've got a proven way of taking care of entrepreneurial leadership teams, and they don't need to worry that we're making this stuff up as we go along.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Metrics are important. So you write about how it's important to measure how successful a process is. You guys at EOS use what's you call it the company scorecard. And I was
Yes.
wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the company scorecard is a 5 to 15 number weekly scorecard that typically augments in an entrepreneurial company what most organizations between 10 and 250 people are already pretty good at doing,
Okay.
which is looking at their financial performance on a monthly or quarterly basis and other important measurables about the prior month or prior quarter or year to date, and then trying to keep things on track that way. The problem with that approach alone is that those are all trailing indicators. And once you've either won business or not won business in February and the month closes, if you're under budget, you're never going to fix that. And so all you can do is focus on selling twice as much stuff as you thought you could sell in March to try and make up for it. And so what we do with the weekly company scorecard is we ask the leadership team to identify leading indicators, the activities-based numbers that are going to produce sales, revenue, customer satisfaction scores increasing, that kind of outcome. But what are the activities you want to measure engaging in on a weekly basis to get those future results? It gives the leadership team the ability to predict what's going to happen in the future, and therefore they have an absolute pulse on the business and can react faster.
What kind of activities do you think would make this up? I mean, from sales, you're talking about number of calls, visits, appointments that are made during the course of the week, and
Meaningful conversations with a new prospect that's never done business with us before is a very common number.
right.
Yeah.
And on the service side, number of tickets that are opened or closed, or how quickly they're closed after they're
Well,
open. I'm assuming, right? Things like that.
I have a dental office in my network that I think has the best example of
Okay.
that. They were struggling with declining patient satisfaction scores, and they were trying to fix that by looking at the customer satisfaction scores, and they were declining. And a receptionist popped up and said, "Hey, I'll tell you why everybody's not filling out the surveys the way they want. We're getting worse and worse at seating patients on time. They've got an appointment at 11:30. They've taken a lunch break. These are busy people. We don't get them in the chair till afternoon. They're pissed."
Yeah.
And so what they put on their activities-based scorecard is the number of minutes between the average number of minutes in a week between when a patient was supposed to be seated and when a patient actually got seated, and they worked to shrink that gap down to less than 5 minutes, their patient satisfaction score is shot right up.
Fascinating. That is fascinating. I mean, it's a lot of data that has to be tracked, particularly for like a smaller company. I
Yeah.
mean, is that like a challenging thing? I mean, it's hard to get people to do that stuff.
Well, it was really challenging 40 years ago when I first started in business because nobody had any data. We were putting them all on, green and yellow accounting sheets,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And now I actually see the opposite problem, Gene, where there's
too much.
tons of data everywhere, but nobody's using it to make smarter, better, faster decisions. Now, what I will tell you is most of our clients have learned that the simpler tick mark on a legal pad kind of ways of measuring things, the better. In
Yeah.
other words, you don't need to go install a fancy CRM system to compile sales data. Just ask your sales people to report honestly the stuff they did the prior week in the simplest, easiest, least time consuming format possible. And that works for about 80% of our clients. So, everything about EOS is how can we keep it simple, keep it clear, and drive accountability around the, basic stuff.
It's funny that you say that, just to go off track a little bit. So I'm a CPA, but my companies, we implement CRM systems, now that you mention that. And we battle all the time between with clients whose eyes are bigger than their stomachs. They want to do so much and compile so much data and track, and they never use it. They don't, and it always turns out to be a mess because not everybody complies with it all. And we spend so much of our time saying, listen, we need to keep the system very simple. If all we knew, we want to check the number of calls that are being made during the week, or just a simple pipeline report that we want to generate every week. That gives us more information and more of a finger on the pulse of the operations than having all this data that's going into the system that nobody's ever using.
That's right.
And I guess a lot of businesses, they get romanced by the software
They
companies.
fall in love with the possibilities, but
Yeah,
they don't start with the basics. Like
yeah,
what I say to those folks,
yeah,
we always say there are groups of people who are natural born simplifiers in the world,
yeah.
and there are groups of people who are natural born complicators in the world. I always say to the complicators, of which I'm one, just to be fully open and honest here, we always say to the complicators, you know what? Could you please just trust us and start with 3 to 5 things that'll
Yeah.
move the needle? And then we'll add 3 more once your team has mastered these basics. You wouldn't teach a T-baller how to hit a split-fingered fastball on a 2 count, with bases loaded. I mean, that's too much information. So let's start with the basics and it's amazing to me how many people reject that notion when it's so obviously.
It's so, and it's funny because I mean, I run into countless clients and prospective clients. They want to, because what they do, they read the in-flight magazines and all the promises that, the CRM systems can provide. So they want to go from 0 to 100 right away. And you say, like, listen, a good CRM project can last a couple of years, and you have to start with contact management. I mean, can you have your 15-person group actually have share a decent database and put notes in and complete activities and do emails where it's, productive and informative and accurate information for just that group, just that contact management. And it is amazing how many businesses can't even do that yet before they get into advanced marketing automation, or service management. So
You got people who refuse to use the 2-letter abbreviations for the states, and then they get frustrated by the system. I mean, it's just so funny how the simple things tend to derail these fabulous pieces of technology all the time.
yeah, it's absolutely true. Okay. You write as well. I'm never going to cover all my questions here. I'm warning you right now
All
in the
good, man.
10
All
minutes
good.
that we have left, but it's fun because, this happens to me every time. And you know what? It's a good thing because people should be, get a little taste of what you're writing about here and say, I need to buy this book to find out how it ends. So, um, you write a little bit about resistance, and pushback. Um, how do you deal with that in your organization? Because it's just going
Yeah,
to happen when you're putting in a process.
yeah. So there's all kinds of reasons for pushback. The 2 most common are change is hard, you go first, is the way I always like to say it, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
one in an entrepreneurial company, there's not a lot of waste. And so typically, if you've got 10 people in your company, Gene, my guess is 9.5 to 10 of you are pretty damn good at your job the way you do it right now. And if that isn't the case, you're not like the federal government. You don't have a lot of non-essential workers you can send home when there's a budget argument, right?
So true.
So to get somebody who's pretty good at his or her job to change a habit is really hard. That's the most obvious change aversion issue. The other thing, though, that needs to be talked about is we are talking about accountability. Okay. So if you are trying to grow and scale a company, there comes a time when the fact that you've got, if you're running a manufacturing business and you've got 10 machine cells run by 10 different team leaders, and the 10 of them have their own unique way of staffing and training and straightening up after a shift and count, you cannot scale with that kind of philosophy, even if all 10 of them produce consistently exceptional results.
Sure.
And because now when you're sharing one person from one cell to augment somebody who's out on another cell, all hell breaks loose. And so what happens is clients underestimate how dangerous that, yeah, well, as long as Gene's getting great results, let's let Gene do it his way. And so that's the other thing is, everybody doing it their own way can't possibly work if you're trying to grow and scale your business. And then the last thing is, nobody really wants to be held accountable every day.
Right.
If we could get away, I mean, the former CPA, you're counting utilization, realization, how many tax returns did you finish? This time of year, I should be very careful talking about that because there may be a lot of grumpy people out there listening to this podcast. But that is, man, it feels like there's a thumb on you, and that's a grind. And so leadership goes a long way towards helping with that. Can you lead in a way where your people understand that we're giving you data and coaching so that you can manage yourself,
right?
So that you know what great looks like. And if you want to be great, this information and this process and these numbers are your tools to be great. It's like a downhill skier or a 100-yard dash runner who's constantly looking at their weight workouts and their training regimen and their times in all kinds of conditions and endeavoring on their own to get better. That's what we're trying to teach with this stuff is, if you want a company full of champions, you need to give them the tools that champions use to make themselves champions, and not be the kind of leader and manager who's sitting there cracking a whip every day, making accountability a victim perpetrator relationship, but a coach mentor relationship instead.
You also say that, one of the ways to overcome challenge, you've as the leader, you've got to be passionate about what you're implementing, right? I mean, it has to come from the top.
You need to believe this is important. And this is the part that a lot of us founding entrepreneurs struggle with. You need to be willing to follow your own processes, right? If your process says, hey, when we have a meeting, you need to start the meeting on time and end the meeting on time, and you're the one in the company who's notoriously late to every meeting, you've just galvanized cynicism into your organization. And so don't make it a rule if you're not willing to follow it.
It's funny you say that as well, because we talk about accountants and CPAs and all that kind of stuff. And, one of the biggest, things that brings down internal control in an organization, particularly in a small organization, is management override, right? Where you've got the rules, like no checks are allowed to go out without these authority, approvals or whatever, except for me. I'm the boss. Just give me a check because I want to get. And the minute that you see that, right, everybody else says, well, he's not following the own rules. Well, why should I be following those rules?
Yeah, who cares that it's payable to the win in an even number? Yeah, you're right. You're right.
What is the kind of syndrome, and why is it such a huge obstacle for leaders?
Yeah, so you might have glimpsed the fit of rage I was in after a session one day, where we ask a question every year of our clients running on EOS. Actually, we ask 20 questions in a tool called the Organizational Checkup that you can find on the EOS Worldwide website. And the question is about the process component. It's, are our core processes documented, simplified, and followed by all to consistently produce the results we want? And you answer that question on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've got a lot of clients who I know for a fact haven't done any of that stuff that will say 4 or 5.
Right.
And then when I say, so wait a minute, I don't remember doing this with you. So maybe you did it alone. Did we agree on your list of your handful of core processes? Well, kind of, Paton. I mean, we just, but have you documented them? And, documenting is not a real subtle word there. That means the steps are written down and you all agree. Well, kind of, Paton. I mean, we basically do it. And so that's the kind of syndrome. And in a company that's growing and scaling, kind of will kill you, because if I'm a brand new person and you say to me, hey, just go ask Bill or any of the other machine team leads how to do that, Paton, and there are 10 different ways of doing it amongst the 10 people, my head explodes.
Yeah.
How can I learn the right way of doing it if you've got 10 people you told me to go ask and they give me 10 different answers, like calling the IRS?
Right.
No offense intended to our federal government.
All right, Paton. So as a wrap up here, what do you want your readers to take away from this book after reading it?
Yeah, so I am passionate about helping entrepreneurs reignite their passion for their business. Far too many people who are running their own businesses feel stuck and frustrated, worried about the future rather than confident in the future. They go through periods where they wonder why they started the business in the first place. Maybe they should have taken a job with a big corporation out of school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So please reconnect with the passion you had for your business. And if you can't do that, EOS and things like strengthening your process component can help you. Reach out and ask for help. That's what all of the 650 people who do this work around the globe are hardwired to do. We're here to help you. And lots of other coaches and consultants and system experts are out there to help you as well. Just don't feel like it's your lot in life to not have a passion for your business. Life's too short, man.
The book is called Process: How Discipline and Consistency Will Set You and Your Business Free. I've been speaking with Mike Paton. His co-author was Lisa Gonzalez. The website for EOS, eosworldwide.com. Did I get that right, Paton?
You did 100% right.
Fantastic. Paton, great conversation. Guys, a great book. We've scratched the surface of what's in this book as well. And obviously, if you're a business leader, a manager, or owner, and you really want to take your business to the next level, it does depend on processes. And this is a great playbook for helping you put those in place. So, Paton, thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to the next book. Are you working on anything new, or is this going to be it for a while?
Couple ideas on the drawing board yet, nothing being put pen to paper. So, Gene, this was a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Everybody, you've been watching and listening to Biz Books. My name is Gene Marks. Thank you very much for spending the time. As you know, I speak to great and smart business authors like Paton about the great books that they have written. We'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode. Again, thanks for listening or watching. We will see you then. Take care.